Welcome, travelers, to High Fantasy. I'm Brett. I clapped and I shouldn't have clapped. You got me clapping. I need my herb pouch. Daddy's been paying for my salt.
This
I'm part of the poop patrol, ma'am.
And I'm Emily. But I'm like, don't make the robots.
Don't make the robots
crunch. I would speak with dinosaur in a second. I have beef with DC. It's a thing. It's a whole thing.
Join us on our epic world-spanning adventures. Armed with only a bit of long-bottom leaf, we will delve into some of the most amazing worlds of imagination that have ever existed. Before we get into that, don't forget to check out our Patreon if you want to support the channel. And without further ado, let's get into it.
You can clap. You can.
Yay! All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of High Fantasy. I'm Brett.
And I'm Emily.
What are we eating today? What are our snackies?
My mouth is so full.
We're eating kebabs.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us in slightly different ways than others.
Brett has garlic parmesan kebabs.
Mm-hmm.
And I have honey chipotle kebabs with a side of crispy rice, cucumber salad, and pickled red onions.
And if you want to see the kebabs being made, go check out the Copper Spoon Inn and Taverns page on TikTok or Instagram, and you can see these delicious kebabs being created.
Thanks, babe.
All right. Without further ado, let's get into our topic, shall we?
We shall.
So, today, I thought it would be fun because we have an up-and-coming D&D campaign that we've all been talking about and been pretty excited about.
Mm-hmm. That we do.
Emily's going to be trying her hand at dungeon mastering.
Dungeon mastering.
So, the world that she has decided to set this campaign in is my homebrew world. Mm-hmm. One that she's played in before. And very few people have ever gotten to see. Mm-hmm. So, since we're going to have some new players going into this world, I thought it would be fun to do an explanation of what the world is. So as a previous player of Inistaria, is there any advice? What's the most pertinent advice you think you could give to somebody going into it that doesn't know anything?
The most pertinent advice. I mean, I think it's less of advice and more of just something to know about the world that kind of affects every game you'd be playing in. And that is that this is a very magic-heavy world. It's built into kind of like this world that all spellcasters get one additional spell slot of each level. Mm-hmm. Which is like huge for spellcasters.
Huge.
And it's basically just that the world is very innately magical. And it's all kind of centered around a college of magic. Which is very much like the big ivory tower.
Yeah.
But it's in the very, very center of this world, because basically this world is one big floating island.
Mm-hmm.
It is an island that is literally surrounded by a bowl of mountains. On the outside of that mountain is untraversable sea. Mm-hmm. If you can even get through the mountains to the other side. Like, it's because the mountains are riddled with rust monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 5 distinct nations within Inistaria. And the center holds the college where everybody learns magic. So that's kind of like a basis of the world, I guess.
That is. Yep, there are 5 major factions, as well as multiple sub-factions within each one of those. The world itself is pretty vast. The thing I was trying for a lot within Inistaria is I wanted to give the feel of a big open world that you could explore. Mm-hmm. But the problem generally is, well, what's past that?
Mm-hmm.
And in a video game or something, you generally have like you can't go that way, kind of thing that pops up. Even if there is an open area where you should be able to traverse, it'll tell you this is where the game border ends.
Don't go past here, dum-dum.
Don't go past here. So
there's nothing there.
I knew that I wanted to build something with an active reason for why that exists. so I could still make a big fun sandbox to play in, but it wasn't going to be like, okay, and then there's this continent over here, and there's this continent over here, and you can go check out all this other stuff, and it's this big, huge open world. Creating a world is a lot harder than making a continent. So I have spent a long time on Inistaria. It's a very fun little pastime of mine. I enjoy adding to it and kind of building off of it and creating little things about it. But let's talk about the 5 factions and kind of like, because you already summed it up pretty well. It's a nice big circular bowl effect where there's a lot of mountains, a lot of treacherous stuff on the outside, but the people within Inistaria, for the most part, live pretty normal lives. You know, there's farmers and there's blacksmiths and all that fun stuff. But let's get into what makes Inistaria, I think, different than some other things, right? And I think that's at the core of what's going on. It is created by a god. So a god made this world. And it's kind of like a snow globe sitting up on his mantle, basically, where his job, he's called the Collector, his job is to make worlds to appease another ancient god called the Devourer. And they're supposed to basically eat these worlds. Through, like, if you play through the main storyline, I guess, was what it would be for Inistaria, it would be you guys defeating this, like, ancient god that's trying to eat everybody, right? But that's kind of more in depth about some other stuff, maybe.
Well, I think that's a really big point to it, though, is that, like, it is, like, this is a singular god among other gods of what a normal D&D fantasy world would be. Like, you look at normal D&D fantasy worlds, and even in this world, there's different gods that exist that people know of. But this specific god is in charge of doing this exactly. This specific god is in charge of creating worlds to basically be a sacrifice for this other god to save literally the rest of all of existence.
Yes.
Because it is that big and it's that scary. And he's basically, the different types of worlds that he makes he doesn't want them to be destroyed.
Yeah.
And he keeps trying to make new worlds to slow it down more and more so they can figure out a way to actually deal with them. And he's kind of putting you in an environment to breed heroes. So one day, somebody within one of his worlds can fix the problem within his world. So he was, like, set out and, like, fix.
That's very true. A lot of Inistaria is built to be, like, he took parts of other worlds to create his worlds. But he had, like, the rule behind that is he has to pick something that would have been lost anyway. So he can't just, like, take this big, thriving civilization that is kicking everyone's ass and be like, ooh, these guys are awesome. I'm going to have all of them just go in this new little snow globe. No. But what he can do is, if history says that this nation would be defeated or destroyed in a cataclysm or et cetera, he can go in and he can kind of just yoink it. Because it doesn't affect, like, it still happened.
And how was that inspired? How did you come up with that? Because I think there's a very big, like, not a lot of people know how to homebrew things or come up with their own stories or implement it in a system. So how did you come up with that idea, I guess?
Initially, I wanted, like, this goes back to one of the first homebrew worlds I tried to create, which was called the Timeless Isles. And what I wanted to happen there is I wanted it to be heroes.
Yeah.
I wanted there to be a reason why it was made up of all of these powerful people.
Yeah.
And so instead of making it so it's like, oh, everybody here is just super awesome and incredible, I made it so the reason that they are there and the reason that they're from different points in the universe is because they are important. They are powerful. They are, like, actual beings that kind of changed the course of history in one way or another, or were amazing in some way.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to be lost. So
They
the
were
initial...
deemed remarkable people.
Yes, exactly. So initially the concept was, let's say you are, I don't know, Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
Terrible person, but he's still, like, there's a big thing to be said there about his leadership.
Yeah.
So he was a big guy in Rome.
Every single time a good protester has been murdered or something, assassinated, that's sort of like for assassinated.
Yeah, exactly.
Martin Luther King is in the Timeless Isles.
Martin Luther King, yeah. Anytime anybody was assassinated. No, so it's definitely the concept of, like, if you were powerful or influential or just a genius even. So, like, Einstein would have counted. You know, but before he died, what if time just kind of stopped around him? And a random dude just showed up and was like, all right, hey man, like, for one, big fan. Two, you're about to die. So that can either happen or you can come with me. And I'll take you to a place where you stop aging. And your genius can live on for technically ever. And you'll never have to stop inventing. So you didn't lose Mozart.
Right.
The world didn't lose Einstein. Like, you didn't have to, you know, imagine what could have been accomplished if those people had been allowed to live another 200-300 years.
I guess that's the question: is are they still were they still influencing the modern or the normal world while they were alive?
I think, because the rule was they had to be taken at a point where they would have been disappeared anyway.
Yeah.
That's why it's that way, so it doesn't change the course of what was going on. So, like, if JFK is about to be assassinated, instead of him actually being killed, he just disappears. Right? And it makes it look like he died. So maybe they put a dummy body in, or, you know, something along those lines. Magic is great for coming up with a caveat bullshit reason for why something happens. But that was the initial concept. And then as it went on, it was like, oh, well, what if instead of the Timeless Isles that are being run by, like, these dragons and stuff, it's this world run by a god. And he's just taking bigger swaths of areas, and he's kind of, like, puzzle piecing them together to create these new worlds. But he has to pull them from something.
Yeah.
You know, like, he can't just, poof, here's your new world. So, like, in Inistaria, there's the Acrosian Empire. And it's all about dragons. Dragons everywhere. Well, the Acrosian Empire is actually in Dungeons & Dragons. That is an official canon thing that did exist. And they were basically a lawful good nation founded by dragons. And they fought another empire at the time, which was called the Beltoreth Empire. And the Beltoreth Empire was evil. And it's actually funny, that's how you get tieflings. That's how tieflings are introduced into kind of like the Dungeons and Dragons setting, is the Beltoreth Empire fighting the Acrosian Empire. They were like, oh, we're fighting dragons. We're at a huge disadvantage. So they decided to start making deals with devils. And those deals would forever impact their bloodlines.
Okay.
So the idea is every tiefling that exists now is from a fallen noble house in the Beltoreth Empire.
That makes a lot of sense. That's fun.
But there was a huge war. And in this war, supposedly what happens is the ground cracks open and swallows both empires. Fully gone from history. So you have, like, some of the biggest, baddest players in that current, like, timeline, and they just vanish.
Interesting.
That's canon. I didn't make that up. That's all, like, official Dungeons & Dragons lore. So I was like, what if, the Collector took the whole nation, the whole Acrosian Empire, and he just was like, plop, and he put it somewhere else. That was cool to me. That was really interesting.
So, going off of that, would you say that there's one place in Inistaria that is older than another? Or do you think it was, like, made at the same time, puzzle pieced together, and then unfrozen into a world?
Oh, I think it was kind of puzzle pieced and then unfrozen, so everybody kind of came to at the same time, you know?
Uh-huh.
Um, it would have been like, oh, we're about to fall into a chasm of death,
Uh-huh.
and then all of a sudden you're surrounded by blue skies and, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't, most of the people in Inistaria are not old enough to remember that happening.
I mean, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because part of the lore of Inistaria is that it began with wartime. There was these five very distinct places that
Mm-hmm.
were very different, and they were all smashed together at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And if everybody was just plucked there randomly, it's canonical that it's wartime. You
Mm-hmm.
know, all of these nations are at war with each other because they're like, we don't know who the hell you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and especially if they just woke up where they're like, we were about to fall into a pit of despair,
Yep.
and now we're here, and we, are traveling, and we realize there's these other people over here, and they're like, we don't know where the hell we are. So all of you are like caged animals, like what happened? Where are we? Surrounded by all these other people that we have no clue who they are. We have no idea where they came from.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, very, very much that, because it is canonical that every one of these nations, something was about to happen to them,
Mm-hmm.
and they would have been erased from history.
Mm-hmm.
So, be it falling into a pit, some giant sorcerer was about to summon, huge meteors to destroy your whole collective of people. All of them would have been coming from that. And so then to just be kind of put into this random place where it's like, oh shit, what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, in the early days of Inistaria, it was war. So there was, nation against nation, everybody kind of vying for their own political spots. Um, as well as just like, I claim this under the flag of blood.
Yeah.
And then as time progresses, an uneasy kind of truce is made between the
Mm-hmm.
nations, and an adventuring group is formed
Mm-hmm.
with heroes from all of the nations.
It's very much like a Avengers Assemble type of thing,
Yep,
but each nation gets to like put their Avenger in into the pot.
exactly. Everybody gets to put forth their champion. Some people put forth more than one.
Mm-hmm.
Others were just like, this is the guy.
So we've been speaking a lot of the nations, and obviously it comes up that there is a big group of heroes that is formed together as kind of like a peace coalition.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it would be smart to just kind of describe what each of the nations are.
Fair.
Maybe I can take one and then you can take
Yeah,
one
that's
because
great.
there's five altogether.
Let's do it.
So, to start off, basically this is set up kind of like a dartboard. Not a dartboard necessarily. This is set up at like there's the donut hole circle,
Mm-hmm.
which is the Mage's College and the Forest of White Dreams, and then in kind of four quarter sections around it are each of the different areas with each of the different rulers. But to start in the college, obviously in the very very center you have the Mages College, and that's where you have your School of Wizards.
Mm-hmm.
In like modern Inistaria times, basically, I would say that it's a big melting pot where it's like people like send in like uh
Anybody with magical talent at all.
well, I was gonna say anybody with applications to actually get into the college, and it's very you are hailed and like congratulate. Like, it's a high honor to get into the college. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like so it's like when a dragonborn gets into the college, it's like a big thing,
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of centered in the Forest of White Dreams. The Forest of White Dreams basically surrounds the college, and the college has a bunch of different buildings. It has the main Mage's Tower, and it has a building for each different school of magic, including druidic magic, necromancy,
Mm-hmm.
evocation, transmutation.
Uh-huh.
It is a big Harry Potter little Koompa, but not even Harry Potter, honestly, because it's more of like a commune hippie campus almost.
So the best way I can explain it is Harry Potter is high school. This is college.
Yeah,
And so it's like a bunch of adults.
but it's still not like a castle. I guess,
No.
is what I'm saying, is they're each
No.
individual buildings,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all designed very specifically for what they're there for.
Yes.
Like the main Mage's Tower, which is this is where assemblies are held, and this is where we get together for events, that's just a big Mage's Tower.
Yep.
Like, what you picture when you think tower with a wizard in it, that's what the main section of the college is. But you go over to the Necromancers, and it's like this gothic cathedral with like a bunch of catacombs and corpses underneath it. And you go to the Druids location, and it's probably a bunch of like huts that they're just smoking weed out of all day. Trees, you know, that sort of thing. So it's not like one big building. It's very like tailored and specific to the type of magic that you're learning. So that main center part is like a really big melting pot, and then there's a dome that surrounds it, which is basically an it's a protection dome. Like, if you want to go somewhere to be safe, you go to the college, because it is there's this dome that surrounds it, which is 5 layers. It's like it's all the colors of the rainbow, like a chromatic dome. That is like anti-magic, you know, like it is the deepest protection. And then surrounding that dome is the Forest of White Dreams. And why they call it the Forest of White Dreams is that there is always a fog over the forest. And if you enter the forest with any ill intentions to the forest or the inhabitants of the forest, it puts you to sleep. And there is a regime of rangers that are there to basically protect the forest and just pick up sleeping bodies and haul them off to do who knows what with them. But the primary residents from this area and the people who were part of this civilization before it left are mostly elves and Eladrin. Which Eladrin isn't something in 5th edition, but it was big in 4th edition,
They
right?
are, yes, so they technically do have Eladrin in 5th edition.
Oh, is it like a...
They're high elves.
Oh, high elves. Okay, so it's elves and higher elves.
Yeah, so wood elves would make up the vast majority of the archers and the people who inhabit the Forest of White Dreams. But Eladrin, it's really funny because like high elves are commonly depicted as like the mage.
Yeah.
So it's like the dude with the long golden hair, and their features are just far too perfect. And they have the huge blue robe that kind of comes down and the regal staff. You know, like if you think Wizard King, you're probably thinking something like that.
Think the Hobbit, Legolas is dead.
Yes. Fendel is, I believe his name's Fendel.
He doesn't matter enough for me to remember his name.
I think he's considered a wood elf in there, but you're getting the right idea.
He's considered a wood elf, but you're thinking long blonde hair, where riding in on a white stag, you know, like.
Yeah, it's very, very likely you're thinking of an Eladrin. They have the ability to do something called Face Step, which is a teleportation ability, because of all of their kindred, like elven people. An Eladrin is the closest to the Feywild, like an actual fairy that you're gonna get. A wood elf still has like connections to the natural world, whereas an Eladrin's like, I'm like this close to basically an actual fae. So it was interesting creating that, because I had this big idea of like I wanted the college to be these snooty assholes for the most part, where it's like, oh yes, we know magic.
Yeah, the Eladrin would be the ones who are primarily residing in the college, and the Rangers are the ones who are in the forest, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. So the Rangers do that. In modern day Inistaria, it, like you said, it's a lot more like everybody's allowed to do their things. At the beginning, I think that the college was a lot smaller. Because it didn't accept as many schools of magic. Yeah. Necromancy is still widely unaccepted in Inistaria. It's one of those where it's like, if you're a necromancer, you get eyed a lot, because dealing with, summoning the dead is typically considered an evil thing. But somebody came along asking the question, why? Why is it evil for me to do this? And they were like, well, because, like, I don't want to see my grandmother raised to do all this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, what about, like, the corpses of criminals? Why can't we use them to, like, I don't know, build up our cities and not have to worry about manual labor and, destroying our peasantry? And someone was like, and someone was like, oh, okay, that's a fair point, but I don't like it. But yeah, like, I really do like the Mages College. I think it's very fun. My favorite one is the Illusion Dorm, because it's called the Choice Dorm.
Okay.
And it's called Choice because choice is an illusion.
You're proud of yourself for that one, aren't you?
So proud of myself for that one. Like, every time I see it, I'm like, I just kind of giggle to myself a little bit, like, very good, very good, very good.
Is there anything else that you want to add about, like, because that was kind of the main middle area. There's still 4 more, though.
I would say just the people of interest, the, like, big movers and shakers of those places. Merlin is the head wizard of the Mages College. He is widely considered the most powerful magic user in Inistaria.
Because he is.
But
he is also a crazy old man.
He is a crazy old man.
Played by Brett. Do it now.
Played by me. do it now.
I mean, it's your voice.
Hey,
so.
Hello, children. Or, like, I guess it would be like, hello, students. It's a pleasure to meet you today. I'm Merlin. that would be, like, a pretty typical interaction with Merlin.
He hands out lollipops on occasion.
Yes, he has in his robe. It can constantly produce lollipops, and he'll just randomly offer them to adventurers if they seem upset or frustrated about something. Would you like a lollipop?
It's only a little bit creepy.
Only a little bit creepy. So there's Merlin. There's his assistant and adopted son, I guess, at this point, Drake, who is kind of. He's the guy who gets a lot of things actually done around the college when there's problems. He is a wizard. I wouldn't, not nearly on Merlin's level, but there's him. And then there's each one of the dorms has their own head mage, which they kind of form a little council of, like, wizards. And then there's the Ranger General of the Forest of White Dreams, who is the biggest, baddest ranger you're going to find in Inistaria, probably. But yeah, and that position changes. Ranger General is a title, so, like, whoever's taking up the next mantle there becomes the Ranger General. But yeah, I think that covers most of the movers and shakers, so sweet, awesome. So that's the college and the Forest of White Dreams. Let's do, Death Jungle.
Death Jungle. We're moving southwest from here.
Moving southwest from here, you will come to the tropical jungles of Death Jungle. This place is made to be like the Amazon on crack. So every time you hear a story about, like, somebody going into the Amazon rainforest and getting, like, bit by a bug and they just die, all of that is true in Death Jungle.
Yeah, they're literally gargantuan creatures that are just like, this is an alligator, but the size of a skyscraper.
Yep. Yeah, there are behemoths.
That's what they're called, behemoths.
In Death Jungle. These are supposedly, like, if you believe the stories, ancient beasts that were created by wizards of old in a war long forgotten, and they kind of just roam the jungle in Death Jungle. There's a lot of them. There's also other creatures that kind of dwell within the shadowy areas of Death Jungle. There's the Night Stalkers, which are just like giant panthers with huge bat wings.
Yep. The way I pictured it was always like kind of towards the mountain area. It was more of a swamp than it was the jungle.
Yes, there is a swamp in Death Jungle. Yeah. There is an ancient black dragon who resides in that swamp. So it's one of those, like, a lot of people stay away from that location. There are green dragons in Death Jungle. There's a lot of just terrifying, awful things you don't want to really... And that's the big stuff. That's not even including the nasty little things that'll probably kill you just by venturing in there. There's also a bunch of very poisonous flowers in Death Jungle, so trying to like forage for your own food is extremely difficult.
It is not a super hospitable environment.
It's so not hospitable. It's extreme. Every other nation here has something that is a deterrent for you. Generally, like, even if it's just guards in cities and stuff.
Yeah.
They don't generally have to worry about that in Death Jungle because just going in there is pretty much a death sentence for most people.
Death Jungle just exists, and it's its own security system.
Yes, so unless you have a guide, which is one of the shifters, the native people to Death Jungle, you probably will die going in there.
Mm-hmm.
Death Jungle is also home to the Labyrinth, which is a enormous subterranean labyrinth made by the Minotaur people, who are widely considered some of the best smiths in Inistaria. They are very adept at crafting magical armors and weapons and stuff like that. They don't have the kind of precision or fanciness that dwarves have when it comes to that. Like, if you need something done to very specific, specifications, you're probably going to talk to the dwarves over in Cedar Moradin. But if you're looking for a flaming sword, you're probably going to go to the Minotaurs of Death Jungle.
Yeah, dwarves are a lot better at, like, the intricate, like, mechanical things.
Yes.
Whereas Minotaur are just good old boys with their swords.
Yeah, got swords, big battle axe. You want some plate armor, something like that, they can make it for you. And they are adept at putting on magical enchantments, which makes them very good just to have on your side in general, because those guys seem pretty awesome. They're kind of a tribalistic society. They have a chief, and then that's kind of their whole hierarchy. Is you listen to the one dude.
Yeah,
and that's it. Everybody else kind of just governs themselves. But yeah, they guard and work in the labyrinth of Death Jungle, and then you have the capital of Death Jungle, which is run by the Shifters. A bunch of different, like, I want to say, like, humanoid, lycanthropic kind of stuff is generally what it looks like.
It's anthropomorphic.
But they're
animals.
not. They're anthropomorphic. Yeah, so yeah, it's fair. It's not lycanthropy because they can't turn back.
Yeah, exactly.
That's their one form.
Yeah.
But they are mostly cat people, like different lions, tigers, panthers, etc., etc. The Shifters of Death Jungle are really fun. I had a lot of fun kind of playing around with them and figuring out how I wanted their society to work. They have different aspects of themselves for taking care of different problems. So there's like the warrior caste, and all they do is fight. That's their whole point. So they're like bigger and stronger than most of the rest of their brothers and sisters. And then you have a new addition to their ranks, which is the hunter caste, and it's mostly wolves and other like pack animals that hunt and like track prey to feed the rest of the inhabitants of this capital city. You also have the ruling caste, which is the king and like kind of their royal family. And then my favorite.
I was waiting for it. I was like, tell me what the last one is.
You have the casters, which have been dubbed the kitten.
They're the kittens.
Yeah, the kitten tribe.
They're the kittens.
And they are all fully grown. But they are very small. About the size of like a goblin.
Yeah.
And they are very adept at magic.
So think it's like a cat, but like the size of a halfling.
Yeah.
So it's like, I like to imagine that there are different types of cats too. So these would be like the bobcats or the house cat varieties, where these guys are lions and tigers and stuff.
Yeah, so you do have, they're like house cats. That's exactly it. So like the ruling caste is generally like lions, and then like the warrior caste are like panthers and tigers and stuff. Sometimes it changes.
Yeah,
Sometimes
and
it's...
there's like you can go in there with any sort of like I remember we
Oh,
made
yeah.
like a bird tribe at one point in time that
Yep.
was randomly off in one corner.
Mm-hmm.
There was a fox folk person who
They
was
were
a
mostly,
potion
yeah,
dealer,
like merchants
like
and
a
stuff.
merchant. Uh-huh.
I loved the idea of having like foxes as merchants. That
They
was
were
really
so
cool.
they were like very like gypsy themed. It was just very fun how you like
Hmm
put that spin on it.
Yeah, the veils and the
Mhm.
whole like the belly dancer kind of outfit idea for them
Mhm.
was really interesting. I liked that a lot. It fit well into having like a merchant cast because it's like,
Uh-huh.
oh yeah, that's all these guys do is they just buy and sell stuff and kind of keep track of that for the people. Um, but yes, so that I think covers most of Death Jungle, other than the
Yeah.
movers and the shakers, right?
Yeah, the movers and the shakers are going to be the king.
Yep.
You know, the king and his posse. And then there's going to be like the leader of each of the different casts, so the warrior cast, hunter cast, kitten cast.
Yep.
It's really funny because I believe canonically the leader of the kitten cast is Perlin.
Perlin. Yep.
Who's just an old
An
guy.
old guy.
He's just an old guy.
Mm-hmm. Super old cat loves falling asleep.
And then there's going to be the chief of the Minotaur. Like you said, there's an ancient black dragon that resides there. And then also the Night Stalkers are big, basically winged cat creatures that live in the swamp area, and they're monstrous, but they do actually have sentience, and they have a queen.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They are aberrations. Yes, I think that covers most, unless because
That should be most of Death Jungle,
most of
which
Death Jungle.
means
On to the next one.
we're going to move southeast now to Death Jungle's next door neighbor, down in the bottom right hand corner of Inistaria. We're gonna go to the Targaryen Plains, it is dubbed the Targaryen Plains right now.
Mm-hmm. It's a placeholder name.
It's a placeholder.
I need to change it because it's too close to. For one, there was the Targaryens, and then there's the Tygarens. The Tygarens are the leaders of Death Jungle for the most part, and that's kind of their royal class. And then you have like the Targaryen Plains. I didn't like how close it was, so I do need to change it.
But placeholder name Targaryen Plains, and we're thinking vast golden fields of wheat. This is very much farming country. But at the center capital of it, the capital city, is basically like a holy city. Think like the White Castle going into holy orders of paladins and clerics. Like this is a system set up that is an order to the church. The church is in charge, and they worship the god of civilization. So you're going to find a lot of different cities within this plains, and then it's going to be surrounded by just agriculture and farm life to be able to sustain the cities that are within this kind of area. This isn't an area that's been fully fleshed out quite yet, because a lot of these areas aren't. The reason that Death Jungle, the Wizard College, and a couple other places are so fleshed out is because they were heavily played in games that we've done at home. This one we haven't really explored a whole lot in any home games. So that's basically the structure of it. There is an order of evil druids that we decided was going to be in this area. They're going to be like shadow druids. That used to actually, in the early days of Inistaria, they were like a hair's breadth away from being fully in control of the civilization before somebody figured out what they were doing, and now it's kind of just an underground secret society that most people don't know about. But for the most part, like the movers and shakers are just kind of like the high priest, the high priests or priestess, there is very much like their own sort of schooling systems within this kind of like holy city. And I guess the other people who are kind of in this area are like wandering barbarian tribes.
There are those, yes.
Goliath, and this is the main sort of people who live in this area are humans and Goliaths. So the humans are the ones who have this very structured civilizations, where the Goliaths are a lot of just like roaming Goliath tribes, and they're Would you say that they're like pillagers? They go to all of these different like farm villages and they pillage and they cause discourse, or do you think that it's more of
I
like
think
they
that
just have their own civilization that's more in tune with nature?
I think that was how it started.
Uh-huh.
Because like we talk about the different ages of Inistaria and
Yeah.
kind of the things that were happening from point A to point B, and that like from the very beginning looks a lot different than what it does in the normal today, and then in the future of like, oh, you've beaten the Devourer, you've done the normal things. Um, so I think that it started out as like the Goliaths were there as pillagers, barbarian, like moving barbarian tribes, and then it kind of evolved into when you had peace times and everybody was actually like coming together and alliances were being formed. I think that the capital formed alliances with these people, and they were like, hey, you guys are huge and really strong, we could use you in our military. This would be super awesome if you want to, like, if we work together, and in exchange we'll provide you with food and like stuff like that. You can still roam if that's what you want to do, but you can go to these different locations and there will be kind of a tithe paid to them for their protection. So instead of it being like a scary thing when all these big band of like huge enormous people with big axes and stuff came by, everybody was like, oh sweet, like these guys are here to protect us and keep us safe. Yeah, sure, here's a sandwich, Jeff. Like I think that's kind of more how it looked in now than it did before.
And something very cool about the barbarians too is something that you kind of worked on a little bit was a unique subclass for barbarians.
Yes.
And basically it was a magma barbarian, a volcanic barbarian where their skins can harden into like hardened lava rock, and through it you can see veins of literal lava kind of flowing through their skins, and it's very like heat based and like kind of lava based, and so I picture they originate from maybe around the mountain range area. Maybe there is a like active volcano kind of tucked away in the mountains that only they know the location of, you know.
Yeah, they I think because a lot of like the more indigenous Goliath to Inistaria, most Goliath are pretty gray in pallor. I think that the normal colorization of a lot of Goliaths in that were just born in Inistaria is more of like that ashy, darker, like almost like charcoal color.
Yeah.
And so they do have a very different like origination, I think, and that is kind of a cool thing about them. Yeah, then I think there's like the movers and the shakers, right? So there is Volcanus, who is he was one of the original heroes put into like the peace times with the different heroes from the nations. And I really like him as a character, but it was hard to kind of like implement it at times because he ends up being the general of the army. Like he retires essentially and becomes like the head honcho of the army in the Targaryen Plains. But he never really thinks that he's retired. And so it was fun having a character that was like, he's a little like senile in a lot of ways. Like he comes to help and he's still very powerful and very strong, but it's a limit to what he's able to do now, but he still thinks he can do anything.
It's the delusions of like your grandpa who went to war and is getting really old and is very much of like, I'll get him.
Yeah.
And it's like, Grandpa, you can barely walk with your cane. You're gonna get him from the couch.
You're gonna get him from the couch. Yeah, it's like where he used to be able to like single-handedly fight 100 people at a time. He can still take down 25 pretty okay. Like, if he had to.
This is fantasy senile, people. Fantasy senile.
Yeah. So it was really fun having that character. And then there's the king, like you said. He rides around on a winged lion. I really loved that a lot. That's like his pet, and it was a gift to him from the god that they worship, because he's literally just he's the just king.
Yeah.
I really wanted a King Arthur kind of guy
Mm-hmm.
for this role, and I think he fit it really well. Um, got the golden armor, of course. The nice magic sword, probably covered in relics, of course.
Oh yeah.
Um, and then the head of the church, and then I think the next person that's not really like a good person would definitely be the head of the Shadow Druids right now. And I think their goal is to get back their Archdruid.
Mm-hmm.
So they're constantly trying to make sure they get him back. Was there anybody else that you remember or
Not
wanted
that
to
I can
like?
think of.
Oh, there were the angels.
There are angels, and also speaking of winged lions and stuff, aren't there like lion statues that are like actually just real lions
There
or
are lion
animated items?
statues. Yes, I forgot about that. Thank you for reminding me.
Not that those are people of like importance or anything. It's just cool.
Yeah, it is a cool feature of theirs because, like, basically, if war were to come to the Targaryen plains,
Mhm.
you would be met with ranks upon ranks of, like, human soldiers and Goliaths in full plate gear. And then behind them, you would have, like, the actual angels from the
Mhm.
god that they worship that you'd have to deal with.
Right. Of all the places in Inistaria, the Targaryen Plains was the place that stayed the most ready.
Yep.
They're like everybody else was like, yeah, there's a war and stuff, but the Targaryen Plains actively like you're forced to be in the military for a certain amount of years,
Mm-hmm.
and all people know that. You know that's for everybody.
Yeah, it is fun because there's two nations that
Mm-hmm.
require active military service of all of their citizens, and it's mostly just to train them. And then it's
Yeah,
like, if
just
you
in
want to be a
case
farmer
he's
after this, go ahead, but like, know that if a raider does come to your farm, you can do something about
nice.
it. Like,
It's just like a cavalry of soldiers just like rides up into your farming village, just like, all right, everybody 16 to 18, go over to Field Z. We're gonna have a training montage for 2 weeks, and then we're gonna head on out.
yeah. And I think you even get to choose. I think I already wrote that down, had
Uh-huh.
that in there. Like, you can either, train with the paladins or you can train with the clerics, but everybody will get training of some martial kind in here. So you do get to know more of what's going on. Since it's such a religious based thing, it isn't like, all right, you're going to be a guard. It's like, no, you're going to train with the paladins or you're going to train with the clerics and you will learn the basics of one of these.
So I think that's all for the Targaryen Plains. But you want to go ahead and do the next one?
Yes. Let's move on to the seat of Moradin.
Oh, you're saving the hard one for me.
Well, I'll do the
No,
Etrosian
you're
Empire if
good.
you want.
No, challenge accepted.
Okay.
It's too late.
So the seat of Moradin is most of the places that we've talked about so far. I think it's really interesting because they're monarchies.
Uh-huh.
You have a very, very specific king or somebody who is above everyone else, and that's it. The Targaryen Plains are that way as well, but the seat of Moradin is ruled. They do have a king, but it's more of like an appointed representative.
Yeah, he's more of like a president than a king.
Exactly, because there is still a democracy, and those people are known as the Iron Council. It's a group of dwarves from different like aspects of running the city that all have a say in the things that happen going forward. And while the president has a lot of say in that regard, it's not the end all be all. The Iron Council can fully just tell him this is what's happening, and there is no around that.
Question, is it just dwarfs on the council? Because in this area specifically, its main residents are both dwarves and gnomes.
That's fair. So there are representatives on the council because I said they're from like different walks of what's going on.
Yeah.
So like there is a representative from the Tinkers Guild, and that's a gnome. The representative from the Tinkers Guild is actually like technically the ruling guy of the gnomes, who's called Orion. Um, and he represents the gnomes in a lot of the regard of like, hey, we need this. Hey, too much is going on here. We're having too many buildings done up, or like not enough residential stuff going on over here. We need more space for our tinkering workshops, etc., etc. But yes, there are other gnomes in points of the representation there. It's not just him, but he represents most of what's going on with the tinkers. Whereas you might have like another gnome that's all about the agriculture, about what's going on, of like, it's literally my job to keep us stocked in potatoes, guys. Like, and that guy might be.
So what does the Seat of Moradin look like? Like, what is the structure of where it is?
Yes. So the Seat of Moradin is basically right in the middle of a huge cropping of mountains. The Seat of Moradin being the largest of those. And it's built very dwarven city. So it's got a huge set of double doors leading into the mountain, and that is where the fortress of the Seat of Moradin is. It's split up into different districts. So there's like the Copper District, there's the Silver District, the Gold District, the Platinum District, etc., etc. Some other minor districts within those, but the Copper District is mostly a place where the crafting and stuff happens. So it like they have huge forges down there that are working 24/7 to smelt all of the metals and stuff that they find, or to process raw materials and stuff like that. It's also where a lot of people who are blacksmiths will learn their apprenticeship down there, or that's where you'll go to get like your foot in the door of those crafting kind of experiences. You're not a full-on craftsman, but you are somebody who's working towards that being a big part of your life. And then the Silver District is actually where most people come in. So that's where the big entrance is. If you go in, you're probably in the Silver District. Now, this is where a lot of the mercantile happens. So if you're a trader or something, a lot of people won't even go to the Copper District. Or any other district. You're here to trade. You're probably here in the Silver District.
Yeah.
So like, if you're a merchant just trying to get a bunch of goods from the Seat of Moradin, this is your bread and butter area. It's also where the vaults are located. So a bunch of the treasure, I guess you could say, of the Seat of Moradin is. People can actively open up like bank accounts here.
Yeah.
And they work as a big, like, you want your money to be safe, you store it in our vaults.
Yeah.
And you get your own place for that. You have to go through a little bit of a rigmarole to get that to happen, but... And then this is also where some of the entertainment happens, but not a whole lot. This is mostly just, like I said, the mercantile. And then in the Gold District, this is where you're making money. Like, this is, they have a huge fighting arena in the Gold District, and that's specifically built to, like, all right, you want to be a gladiator and you want to make money? You're going to go in there. You want to be a sponsor for a gladiatorial team? You can do that. You want to place bets on who's going to win? Like, there's always something going on there to make a shit ton of money or to lose a fortune. Like, this is also a great place to go if you're looking for work, because this is where the bounty board is. This is where the local adventuring guilds and stuff can be found. This is kind of the place to be if you're looking for something to do.
Yeah.
There's also like gambling halls and other crazy stuff like that. Anything you can find that's probably a game of chance, you'll find in the Golden District. The Platinum District is where most of the nobility and like the Iron Council, stuff like that, that's where they do their business.
Yeah.
It's also one of the most heavily guarded areas in the Seat of Moradin, because there's so many important people there. So getting into the Platinum District is pretty much impossible unless you have like a summons from somebody.
And it's probably... So, do people live in these districts? Like, are there houses? So, okay, so when you move up through districts, do you basically move, like...
Most of the time, yeah, you kind of move to where it's convenient. So, like, if you're a shopkeeper, chances are you have like a little apartment above your shop and that's where you live. So if you're in the Silver District and you're a merchant and that's all you do, that's probably where you're living and where you're kind of doing stuff. If you're an apprentice, they have a big area down there for their apprentices to live. That's not like, because you're not expected to be here forever.
Yeah.
So a lot of the housing in the Copper District is not really housing. It's more just like, this is where you're going to stay while you learn your shit. And then after you're done with that, you're probably going to move to the Silver District. Silver District has the most amount of housing.
Yeah.
Because that's where a lot of the movers and stuff
majority of where people are.
is the Silver District.
Would you say that people in poverty are kind of down in the Copper District as well?
Yes.
That's shit happens.
That's also where the scrapyard is.
Yes.
So anytime there's just a bunch of metal from any automatons that might not have worked, or maybe there's like a big battle happened and you just grab a bunch of armor off the dead people and you throw it down into the scrapyard, and it will be repurposed and used for other things later. But it's a big thing of like, there's gnomes down there that are just basically going through the equivalent of a fantasy junkyard. And like there's scrap pups that are made by the tinkers, and so you'll have like these rusty kind of like clunkers of a dude that's just coming along, and it's like, all right, come on, let's go, Alfred, and have this just, kind of amalgamation of parts and stuff as he's just like, going along.
That's adorable.
I really like the scrapyard and the whole like concept of the Copper District, because anytime there's something that you just have that's kind of I never thought to ask myself this question, like, where are the copper ingots made? It's like, they're down here in, this location.
Yeah.
Or it's like, where do I go if I want a bunch of chainmail, just a bunch of regular chainmail? It's like, that's probably down there too, because they make the chainmail for the Silver District where they sell everything. Right. So if you want to go and kind of get it at the base, that's where you would go to do that.
This isn't anything fancy. This isn't things that are going to be enchanted. These are the things that are crafted magnificently. This is going to the hair salon where they're training people to be hairstylists versus going to the like $500 like they're going to give you champagne while they cut your hair.
Exactly. Also, the Gold District, thank you for reminding me, is the location where their prison is. And it's notorious for being basically put on this big chasm. And, like, the sounds of the things that live in that chasm can be heard from around the prison.
That's right. Like the worst convicts or something, they have a cell where it's a bar, and then it's just open up so they can jump if they want to.
Yep, exactly. So if you want to, you can just jump and take your chances with whatever's been down there. No one's ever been seen again after jumping into that pit, either from fall damage killing them or from whatever's down there eating them. But it's always an option. You can try and survive. You could try and come back, if that's what you want to do.
Insane.
Never works.
I love that concept, though. I love the concept of, like, you have two options here. One, stay here and wither and rot. Or two, jump.
Yep.
Insane.
That's what you can do. There's also a place called the Depths, which is where a lot of the like public sewer system kind of thing would be located. And it's also the location of some place called the Doors. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Some place called the Doors. So the Doors, it's an enormous subterranean chamber where they have basically put, anytime there was a hole, they put a big door there to kind of stop other things from coming through that way. And currently it is being watched over by the vast majority of the militia for the dwarves with their siege equipment, because a lot of nasty things like to come through the doors.
There's crazy things in these mountains. Like, these dwarfs were warned, there's some shit in these mountains, and they're like, bet.
Yeah.
And they built their civilization inside the mountain.
Yeah.
And they just sit there with their heavy artillery, waiting for something to come out. I remember we were briefly playing a game that was set in this area. We were told to go check out one of the tunnels because they had sent like a scouting party in and they never came back because something weird was happening with the tunnel. We went in and we just immediately noticed that there was just little itty bitty like palm-sized imps just covering the walls, like, so much so that you could not move. Like, it was just covering every single surface, and it was just little tiny imps with razor sharp teeth that wanted to bite your face off and were immune to fire damage.
Yep.
Like,
They had a burrow speed, and so you would look. There was all these little tiny holes in the wall, and you guys were like, "What's in the holes?" And one of your characters was like actively looking inside the hole to try and determine what was sleeping inside of there.
That's right.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of terrible
Beds.
things.
They were like, ooh, it was like a hive. Ooh.
Yeah. Very porous.
So that's pretty much the seat of mourning. Movers and shakers, though.
Yes. Do you want to talk about anybody you remember?
So there's obviously the king of the seat of Moradin, who is a person. King Magni.
Which, once again, names need to be changed because I stole that from World of Warcraft, I know.
So there's King, not Magni. But then there's also the head of the guard. Very prominent figure, as well as the head of the Tinkerers Guild and kind of the representative of the gnomes. And obviously the council members that are below the king. You know, those are majority-ish. There's the guy who runs the scrapyard.
Yeah.
He's very important.
The Forge Master, like a few people like that, not really too crazy.
But yeah, they're not like super important within, like, people like them. Like, they're people.
Yeah, like they have to get certain things done, but you know.
That's about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is the seat of Morden, which leads us to our very last section, which we kind of touched base on a little bit already, which is the Acrosian Empire. This is our upper left-hand side of Inistaria. We're going to the northwest. It is basically the Acrosian Empire has been described to me as like castles. You know, like think D&D castles. You know, like think castle walls, moats, that sort of thing. But the very interesting thing about the Acrosian Empire is that in Inistaria, it was plopped into the middle of the desert. And now this desert is exactly what it sounds like, a barren desert. But the really cool thing that Brett wanted to do in this area was kind of bring in the idea of the collector collecting things. So just random lost hidden corners. So the way I always pictured it is that you're walking through a desert and you see something in the distance. You think, there's no way that could be happening. But sure enough, you keep walking and you eventually come up to a wall. Just like a cube, a 5x5 cube. Maybe it's bigger sometimes. Sometimes it's a 10x10. Sometimes it's a 30x30. Sometimes it's 300 feet by 300 feet. But it's always just like a cube that has just been cut out of something extremely different. So think a snowstorm in the middle of the desert. A random tower in a lush garden. A tropical paradise. But they're just randomly set inside of this desert. And that's kind of the main surrounding area of the civilization of the Acrosian Empire, which is a council of dragons, basically. And within the civilization, the primary citizens are dragonborns and kobolds. And they very much focus on like enchanting things, enchantment magics, imbuing items, and imbuing weapons with magical abilities. And they're very much like a sorcerer kind of warrior cast to them, because again they were in the middle of an army or the middle of a war. When they were plucked out of time. So it's basically there are different dragonborns that were created for each of the specific different dragons that are on this council. Now in Inistaria, it's gotten to the point where it's a council of all different kinds of dragons. There's chromatic, there's metallic, and there's gemstone dragons. And it's a council of ancient to twilight dragons, which are as old as dragons can get. And now something about ancient dragons when they become twilight dragons is when a dragon that has gotten that old to the state where it's a twilight dragon, when it dies, it causes a calamity, basically. So whether it's in a specific distance wide, there's some sort of environmental disaster. So when a twilight red dragon dies, a volcano erupts from the ground
Yep.
and decimates everything within, what was it? Like, how many miles?
It really is dependent on the DM. It's a
Uh-huh.
story aspect that they decided to move away from, but I'm like, no, it's cool. So in 4th edition, I don't know if it was introduced in 4th edition, but in the Draconomicons, that was where Twilight Dragons existed. And the big thing was it kind of seemed like this is just a story aspect for you to use as the DM. So you can say that it spans however far you need it to. You can say it's an enormous thing. You can say it takes up an entire continent, or maybe that one of these ancient civilizations was swallowed by this huge volcano that erupted because they thought they could kill the dragon. You know, like, it is really cool. It's a very fun concept.
One of my favorite ones is the Blue Dragon. It's a 1,000-year storm.
Yep.
Just a perpetual 1,000-year thunder lightning storm. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And a really cool part that you put in there is that because the civilization is like based around this Council of Dragons, and there are these Dragonborns who kind of have like committed their lives to the different specific types of dragons, it is considered like it's almost like a pilgrimage and a rite of passage to, if your dragon has died already, to go and live in these environments created by these calamities. So if the Twilight Blue Dragon died and there was a 1,000-year storm, it's considered a kind of a rite of passage to spend a year of your life in the storm, you know, or and they're kind of considered monuments at that point, almost like Japanese temples, you know, where it's like there's these nature temples that are to honor specific things. They're considered temples and like holy places for these dragons that have passed away. And when a dragon knows that they are on the brink of death, they go and they fly out to their own place, which they make their own. And that is where their temple will be. And that also kind of forms certain landscapes within the desert, is all of these different temples to these Twilight Dragons who have passed away, because over time they were already pretty old dragons, you know, and in the history of Inistaria, there have been multiple of them who have had to go and go pass away and go their own way, you know.
Yep. They left the council and they became the new holy place for their people. Yeah, that's really cool. And we've actually just been creating some new fun stuff for this with 2 new subclasses that we were thinking about introducing.
We haven't actually started playing yet, but this is our next home game that we want to do.
So that could be really fun. But so obviously, like, when we think about these nations, a lot of what I think about is like what makes them unique and what makes them like a fighting force to be reckoned with. Right? So, like, with Targaryen Plains, you have the whole Holy Order of Knights kind of thing. You have angels and actual, like, you know, divine kings and stuff like that. So that's what makes them a force to be reckoned with. With Death Jungle, you just trying to survive in their area will probably kill you. So
dwarves are just crazy.
Yeah. Dwarves are nuts. Well,
same thing with the Rangers. It's like they're just really good at hurting people.
Yeah, like the dwarves were supposed to be really cool because in Inistaria I implemented guns. Like they have firepower, like actual, you know, guns. And I did that because their head tinker Orion figured out a way to basically make mirrors into other realities, and he found Earth.
He found us.
And he was like, oh man, this is awesome. And so he created the first portable communication device, which are crystals that work mostly like our phones do. But basically everybody else was like, oh, I need money for my research, so I'll sell this other stuff. And he made guns. And he was like, oh my gosh, so it's Arcanotech, but it's basically, you know, revolvers, rifles, that kind of stuff.
He watched one too many episodes of Cops.
Oh, I could see it.
Wow, those police are so efficient.
Yeah. And with the dwarves' ability to, like, craft metal exactly the way that they needed to, you were easily able to make barrels and intricate, things like levers and fun stuff like that.
He just freaking YouTubed how to make
a gun. And then I'm gonna sell that in this fantasy universe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. He just looked up a blueprint and was like, all right, make this. And they were like, oh my goodness.
Like the most redneck trailer park, and he like looked in on their meth lab, and he's like, yes, they will teach me the ways.
Yeah, but yeah, one of the biggest things that make the dwarves scary as a nation is that they have firepower. Like, they even have artillery, stuff like that. So it is kind of scary that they can do those things. But I think the funniest thing about the Etruscan Empire is the thing that made them scary from the beginning is the thing that makes them scary today.
A bunch of ancient dragons.
Like, you just don't. Who's stupid enough to fight them?
Like, they have warriors. They have some people, they have a protection. There's a high sorcerer.
Yep.
Who kind of rules over as kind of the monarch almost.
Almost, yeah.
So they have, a defense, but for them, not really compared to everybody else because their defense is ancient dragon. Like,
they have wyvern riders. They have a few little things like that.
And when we say there's a council, there's at least 12 to 15 ancient dragons at any given time, with some already having passed away. Like, there's a lot of different types of dragons. So truly, it's like, it really is a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, like, all you have to do is actively upset these people for them to just wipe you. It's disgusting. And not to say that it wouldn't be a fight, but it's still, I think that is a terrifying concept of like, oh, shit, they've got a dragon. Oh, they've got 12. They've got 15 dragons. Shit.
That's a lot of dragons.
We're boned. We're so boned. Yeah.
But I think one fun thing to bring up, because we are talking about the Etruscan Empire and kind of the next game that we're going to be playing, is we really want to spec out a couple of different subclasses for different things that sound very cool, but that we don't think have been either touched on a lot in general or done well. Done where it feels like it actually works the way you want it to. And so Brett's going to be playing a rune priest, which is basically sort of a cleric subclass focused on being more of like a shield and a tank, and like buffing the shield and certain items that they have with runes that give them special abilities. And I'm going to be playing a blade dancer sorcerer. Because almost arcane trickster vibes, but wanted it based more on magic and less on, the physical part of it. Like, I want the attacks to blend with each other, not just be, I can either hit you with a sword or I can cast spells. So it's basically enhancing weapon strikes with magic.
Which is a very fun concept. I can't wait to start testing out some of these. I'm really excited about it. But yeah, movers and shakers, I guess.
The High Sorcerer, obviously the Council of Dragons, right?
For sure. All of them are very important.
And then you said, like, there's a High Sorcerer who wields, like, a chromatic staff, which is basically made from a scale of each of the different dragons on the council, which is the coolest shit.
Super fun.
Super fun.
Talk about rainbow representation.
And then I would say there's probably a head kobold, who's like, I always think of the kobolds as the librarians. Like, they're the knowledge keepers, where they're like, we know how to enchant things, and we know how to, like, we know our history because of the kobolds. They keep their little tallies and tabs, but that's how I picture it.
Officially, they are, like, their mastery is over alchemy.
Oh, okay,
so
that makes sense.
There's, like, the kobold poison master, and like the head guy that's responsible for things like healing potions and stuff. But that's mostly what the kobolds were there for. It's really funny because, like I said, there's the wyvern riders. They just drop bombs. That's their whole thing, is like, oh, alchemical fire. So you have a bunch of kobolds riding these, like, not dragons. And they're just dropping things on people. Boom, 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 boom.
You just see like an ancient dragon in the sky, then a bunch of little itty bitty tiny dragons with other itty bitty or tiny dragons on their backs, like, ah!
It would be like seeing a bombing run in our world, but instead of planes, you see, like, wyverns.
You see a bunch of kobolds.
Crazed kobolds.
You see 3 kobolds in a trench coat.
Yeah.
On the back of a wyvern throwing bombs.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Pretty much. Yeah, so is there anything else about Inistaria that you think should be covered, or just is an interesting thing, like a factoid, or
Inistaria is cool and fun. And if you want to hear more about it or have specific questions, I feel like that's a really good place to start. Leave them in the comments.
That's fair. All right, yes, thank you all for listening. We appreciate you all for being here. If you like the channel and you want to support us, please go check out our Patreon. Our Patreon viewers do get to vote on our next subjects and our next topics that we put in the Patreon.
And they get early access.
And they get early access to these episodes a whole week early.
A whole week early.
So we don't put everything behind a paywall for you guys. Like, you will 100% get access to these no matter what. But if you do like to support us, it's kind of a little fun thing we like to give everybody. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you all again next time. And until then, have a good one, everybody.
Bye!